Hello, and welcome to the 2019 City of Riverside City Council debates. My name is Patricia Locke Dawson, and I am the president of the Raincross Group. The Raincross Group is a group of passionate and involved citizens who work hard to make and keep Riverside an amazing place to live. We need to elect leaders who will be good stewards of our city. This year, we have 4 seats on the City Council that are up for election. These are the seats that represent wards 1, 3, 5, and 7. And so the Raincross Group is proud to co-sponsor the 2019 City Council debates, along with our partners, the PIC Group, Riverside Community College District, the Press Enterprise, and Charter Communications. We hope that these debates will help you make an informed decision. Our moderator for the debate will be Brad Pomerantz, television host and producer of KVCR's Uncovered in the Archives. A recording will be available through the Raincross Group website. And remember, this June's election is through a mail-in ballot only, so please don't forget to vote before June 4th, and stay engaged. Thank you for joining us, and please enjoy the debates.
Welcome to the 2019 Ward 3 Riverside City Council debate. My name is Brad Pomerantz. I am the host of Uncovered in the Archives, playing on KVCR PBS for Greater Inland California. It's my honor to moderate this debate, brought to you by the Raincross Group, the PIC Group, Riverside City College, Spectrum, and the Riverside Press Enterprise, who is streaming this debate online. In today's debate for Ward 3, we will have 4 candidates joining us. It's my honor to introduce you to them. They are Ronaldo Fierro. He is a Riverside Commissioner and restaurateur. Warren Avery. He is a businessman and father. Richard Rubio. He is a government relations officer. And Jelani Bakari. He is an educator and grant facilitator. During this debate, which will last about 1 hour, I will be asking a series of questions. Responses can run up to 90 seconds long. In my discretion, I may ask some follow-up questions to which the answers may be responded to at my discretion as well. I thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and I'd like to start. I would mention that the order of the answers will be as follows: 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll go 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, and that will be the order throughout the debate. So let us begin with our first question. Briefly, gentlemen, introduce yourselves, and in 2 or 3 sentences, explain why you want to serve on the City Council for Ward 3 over the next 4 years. We're going to start with Ronaldo Fierro.
Well, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us all here to talk about our vision for Riverside. First and foremost, my name is Ronaldo Fierro. I'm a small business owner here in Riverside. I own 2 restaurants in downtown, the Salted Pig and W. Wolfskill.
Oh my, the Salted Pig.
First and foremost, I have to give a shout out to my 6-year-old daughter who just turned 6 today. Today's actually her birthday, so if I had to leave her Nintendo tea party to come do this, I had to at least wish her a happy birthday. And the reason I'm running for Riverside City Council is that there are many issues that I'm passionate about: economic development, homelessness, and fiscal responsibility. And I truly believe that my resume and my track record of getting things done best qualifies me to solve these issues. I own 2 businesses in town that employ over 70 people, so when I talk about economic development, I kind of have a starting place to come from. When I talk about homelessness, I serve on the board of directors of Path of Life Ministries, which is one of the largest organizations in the county trying to help solve this issue. And I serve on the City of Riverside's Budget Engagement Commission, which advises the City Council and the Mayor on spending priorities, and I have often lobbied for fiscal responsibility while serving on the commission. So I look forward to answering everyone's questions, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
I am passionate about bacon-flavored popcorn, and I'm not sure
Aren't
why
we
you
all?
didn't bring any. So we will move on from there.
Ask nice questions. I'll
For
bring it next
shame.
time.
Let's move on to Warren Avery. Mr. Avery.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you to the Raincross Group, the Press Enterprise, Spectrum Charter, RCC, and the PIC Group for hosting our forum today. And thank you to all of you for watching and taking the time to learn about each one of us. So thank you. My name is Warren Avery. I am a husband, a father, and a businessman. And I am running for City Council because I have a vision for Riverside. And that vision includes making our families, our neighborhoods safer, by giving the tools to our police officers and firefighters, all the tools they need. I want to also resolve homelessness, not just manage it, but actually work to resolve homelessness proactively. I want to manage and actually, balance the city budget, taking away wasteful spending, unnecessary spending, work with our schools, giving our schools the attention, the tools, and the mentoring that they need for our students, so that way when they graduate, they're ready to go in today's economy. And then that will all ensure that Riverside continues to be a great place that we all choose to want to live, work, and play. I look forward to being here, and I look forward to answering all the questions.
Mr. Rubio.
How do you do, sir?
Thank
How are
you.
doing?
Thank you for being here.
Well, I'm Richard Rubio, and I would like to first thank the Raincross Group and all those affiliated with putting on this show today. I've lived in Riverside the majority of my life. I'm the most qualified candidate, not because I say so, but solely because my experience speaks for itself. I would like to announce today that the District Attorney for Riverside County, Mike Hester, has given me his endorsement. I work for the District Attorney's Office as a Government Relations Officer. As the Government Relations Officer, I work closely with all 28 cities in our county, as well as our local city, state, and federal officials. This also includes the Sheriff's Office and all law enforcement agencies. I work directly with all 12 Native American sovereign nations in Riverside, as well as I sit on the Planning Commission. I also sit on the advisory board of the superintendent of schools, and besides that, I also sat on 2 terms on the grand jury. My intent is to find routes to clear the homeless issue, to find financial stability in our city, and to listen and find the economic development should not come with the price of infringing on our quality of life. I would ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bakari.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to the gentleman on the dais, congratulations. My name is Jelani Bakari. I'm a citizen of the city of Riverside, and I have been a citizen since 1983. I come here today because I'm running for city council because I have a strong belief in the power of service. With my wife, a Kaiser physician, my 3 children who are UC students, I plan to put together something that will help and benefit the city of Riverside. I've kept my ear to the ground, bringing diverse groups of seniors, students, and working families together to solve problems and uplift our community. I have spent over 25 years advocating for and working with Riverside students and residents. Through United Civic Action, we can bring our neighborhoods together, amplifying our voices and building a better future for our city. Let us work together to building our parks, our senior centers, and our new businesses for Riverside to enhance our tax base and to uplift our community and bring us closer together in unison. I would be honored to receive your vote, and I thank you for taking the time of watching us today.
Thank you all. I'd like to begin with an issue specific to Ward 3, and that deals with traffic. As you know, the current council member allowed the Crystal View Terrace to open to overlook, which increased cut-through traffic by almost 300%. I believe Mr. Bakari lives in that neighborhood. At the same time, the city's traffic division is proposing traffic signals at the intersections of the historic Victoria Avenue and Washington. Talk to us about how you will address those specific issues, but more generally, how you will look at the question of traffic in Ward 3. I'd like to start with Mr. Avery.
Sure, thank you very much, Brad. So, yeah, traffic is something that every single one of us deals with on a daily basis, and it's nothing that anybody likes, right? So I think when you look at, as we grow as a city, more people that come into the city, more businesses, that is something that's going to happen as traffic. We have to be smart as we look into our growth. As we continue to grow and prosper as a city, we have to be smart about that. So we're taking into that account and we're looking at traffic. We're looking at all the impacts of our growth. As specifically, you asked about Washington and Victoria. I mean, this is a beautiful, historic, street, Victoria. And that's something that we can't just take lightly. I don't think a traffic light is the right answer at that spot. I'd like to look at maybe a traffic circle, which is sometimes it works in other cities, other localities. You go in traffic circles, keep that flow moving. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. I know going to friend's house that intersection could be tough. So if we look at maybe something like a traffic circle.
Okay, terrific. I'd like to move on to Mr. Rubio.
Well, thank you again, Brad, for the question. And one thing that, as being a long-term resident of Riverside and knowing the area where I live, which is off of Central Avenue in between Streeter and Palm area, we have a backlog of traffic anytime in the morning to the afternoon, and more so, I would have to believe, in that Washington, Victoria area. It's not one that I look for having another street light could go up. It is something that having a street light tends to, if it's not timed right, we're asking about the timing of a light, could also backlog the traffic. Setting it up where you have a semicircle, or much like what they do in Europe, we're asking about taking away from the city the beautification that we have with the roses and bushes and everything else that's in that area. So it's a dilemma that we face because, again, the city grows. People want to get from here to there in a moderate time. My preference is that I would not put in a light.
Okay, Mr. Bakari.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, when we think about traffic, especially when it's in Ward 3 in the city, we know that you spoke specifically on Washington and Victoria, yet we do know that Van Buren and Arlington would be an issue, Streeter and Magnolia, Central and Magnolia, all are very, very busy. Yet, when we speak specifically on traffic, I think it's very important that we understand we as a city is not the only one that's dealing with it. When we deal with traffic, we must think about the county, we must think about the state, and we must think about the federal government, because all of them play a critical role in our traffic. Washington and Victoria is notorious. All you have to do is go there at 7:15 in the morning or somewhere around 3:45 in the afternoon, and you'll see the dramatic backlog. Yet, we can do some things. Is lighting or is traffic light the answer? I really don't know, but I do know if the answer is there, let's think about synchronized lighting and smart signaling. It's not, we can understand that through how we set it up from the beginning. We have to understand that where we're looking at putting a light is our Victoria area beautification zone. So we have to think holistically and ensure that we're taking care of the district, at the same time working with our partners to have a successful traffic issue.
Mr. Fierro.
Okay. So traffic is clearly an issue in the city of Riverside, not just specifically in Ward 3, but obviously citywide. In terms of Ward 3 specifically, if we're talking specifically about the intersection of Washington and Victoria, so the roundabout has been proposed by the city, and it was a topic of discussion, and it was met with a bunch of resistance. Understandably so. Victoria is one of the most beautiful historic artifacts this city has, and it's one of the few no-touch, off-limits zone for that kind of development. So I would oppose any kind of light, any kind of roundabout. Unfortunately, because of that historical preservation, that area is it's off-limits. So we need to find different ways to relieve arteries in different parts of the city.
But what about in your area, for example? I know you live off that Crystal View Terrace area, so you're impacted by the changes that were made.
I am, absolutely. So I'm right off of Myrtle right there, off Victoria and Myrtle, right by Poly High School. And I deal with quite a bit of traffic from the high school and the Alcott Elementary School that's right there as well. And it can be an issue, it really can be. But I'm not a traffic expert for sure, and I don't, I think I know everyone's resume here on this dais right now, and I don't believe anybody here is an expert as well. So I would like to bring in traffic consultants and find different ways to solve these problems and address them in a way that doesn't impact Victoria Avenue, but can also start relieving the issue a little bit, because Ward 3 is the economic center of Riverside. It's in the center of the city. It has the Riverside Plaza, so there's just going to be a lot of traffic. There's 2 large high schools, so I think we need to be conscious about making sure that we can alleviate traffic in Ward 3.
Let's talk about your collective resumes, as you mentioned. If you look at the current Riverside City Council, and even those in the past, many of its members are retirees, are pensioners. They already on the other side of their employment, their full-time employment. The 4 of you all have full-time jobs. You are not retirees, you're not pensioners. So what are you thinking? Why are you running for city council? I mean, this is a job that really does not provide full-time pay, yet requires pretty much full-time hours. So let's start with you, Mr. Rubio.
Well, one of the reasons why I believe that, why I'm running and why, is what I ran once before. And I was a much younger man. I thought I had some of the answers, but I learned over the years that you have to put in the time. You have to put in time in the community. You have to be involved with the community. You need to know how it ticks.
But do you intend to give up your day job?
I work for the DA's office, and like I mentioned to you, the district attorney is endorsing me. And what we're able to do is we're able to work out a contract.
Flex schedule.
A flex schedule. So, and much like I wouldn't be the only person who's worked for the county or the DA office who's been able to do this. So it's not something that would hinder me in any way. The other part of it is that the job calls for an assistant that you have, and that's something that I believe years ago they didn't have one, so the city council person was one and only. Now we have an assistant who's able to go to and meet different meetings. Yes.
Mr. Bakari.
Your question specifically?
Is about most city council, I don't want to say most, but many city council members in Riverside have been retirees. You are not a retiree. You have a job, and as do the other 3 men on this panel. So I ask you, why do you want to run? Why do you want to be a city council member? It's a full-time job without full-time pay, arguably. How are you going to do this?
Presently, with many of us, especially myself, I'm actively engaged in the community wholeheartedly already. When I decided and thought, oh, should I run? I went to individuals like Dr. Loveridge. I went to individuals like Rose Mays. I went to individuals like Jack Clark Jr. and asked them, what more can I do with assisting seniors? What more can I do with working with kids and networking outside of RUSD? What more can I do to help with Latino network and perhaps bringing the Cheech in the library to our community? How can I do more working for the Parks and Recreations? And upon talking to our esteemed community, it became apparent that running for councilman would add to that prestige, yet at the same time, let me enjoy the fruits of the labor that I already do. I don't think I'll ever retire. I think I'll always be working. And one of that is because I feel that I'm suited for that, and I continuously do it
Yeah,
already.
and we appreciate your noble efforts, but do you have time? I mean, I think you have a full-time job.
Yes.
So
Yep.
how will you find the
Definitely.
time?
Just like now, you create time. I have a full-time job now. I'm in many different organizations and many different things. Yes, you'll have to slow down a little at the job, which won't be hard at all. But at the same time, it will give me the opportunity to have access to the community and work deeper with them.
Who's going to make the bacon-infused popcorn if you're on the city council? I mean, come on. These are important matters.
fair enough.
But I do want to ask, you have a full-time job.
Yeah.
Why do you
So-
want to do this?
Of course. So, I mean, it's funny when you ask, like, why do you guys want to do this? It was flashbacks to when I first asked my wife if I could do this. So
Most important voter of all.
it was the hardest vote to get, for sure. So lucky enough for me, and I can't speak for anyone else, but running a business is a little bit different than just having a 9-to-5 job. In a lot of ways, it's easier and harder at the same time. So part of running a business and doing it at scale is delegation, is managing time, is managing staff. So it was all those reasons that I thought I would be most qualified to be able to balance basically what you're asking, how am I going to have time to do this? But lucky enough for me is that I have done a good job of hiring qualified people I feel can run my businesses as good and frankly a lot of the times better than I feel I could. So the second I decided to run for this office, I knew I was going to be taking a much more abbreviated, almost ceremonial type role with my businesses so that I could pursue this, civic duty that I felt a call of action to come do. But it's certainly a concern. It's a fair question, like how are you going to manage all these different things? Lucky enough for me is that I've surrounded myself with qualified, smart people who I think are going to be able to help me take on this new role.
Yeah, Mr. Avery, you are fortunate in that you have a full-time job, but you work for a large corporation.
Yes.
You're not a business owner, no aspersions at all.
Right.
And so how do you plan to kind of juggle that, given that element in your life?
Absolutely, and sure, just like Mr. Fierro and everyone else, first you go to your wife, right, and you get their support. And the second phone call was to my job, and the second phone call was, hey, here's what I would like to do. Here's why I would like to do it. Do I have your support? And that was my second phone call because I knew I was going to have to keep my full-time job. So I needed to have their support. And once I laid that out, talked to my supervisor, she was great. She said, obviously this is what you want to do. I hear your passion. And if you believe that you can do your job now, you know what your job is, you're a big boy, you know what your job is, and you can do this too, then we support you 100%. And so we talked about what the times were right there. So right from the very beginning, and then past that, I then spoke to almost every current council member.
Right.
And I spoke to them about what are the true time commitments? How can I do this? Can I do this with another job? I made sure to do that due diligence before I put my hat in the ring, that I was ready. My boys are old enough now, 21 and 16, that, now there's not as much. I'm sad about it. My youngest is going to be going off to school somewhere. I'm going to be an empty nester, and now the coaching that I do is not going to happen. Going to the high school games, not going to happen. It frees up some of that time that hasn't been there before.
I want to ask a question, one-word response, yes or no. If you are on the city council right now and the following measure came up, how would you vote? And the measure is to pull back city council meetings from 4 times a month to 2 times a month. I think you are uniquely suited to answer that question. So I'll just start at the beginning. Mr. Fierro, would you rather have 4 times a month or 2 times a month?
4 times a month.
Mr. Warren, Mr. Avery, I should say.
That's all right. I've been called a lot worse.
Exactly.
That's all right. So, right now I would say, knowing what I know, 4 times a month seems appropriate.
Yep, Mr. Rubio.
Without a doubt, it should be 4 times a month.
Okay, Mr. Bakari.
4 times.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Speaking of pensioners, many of whom are on the city council, I want to talk about pensions. As you know, much better than I do, the city of Riverside has over $560 million of unfunded liabilities. And so I want to ask you about that tsunami of high pension debt that faces our city. How would you look to pay for those rising pension costs? If any, what services would you advocate trimming or cutting outright to cover the required spending on retirees? And please be as specific as possible. I believe this first answer goes to, is it Mr. Rubio? Did you answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Of course.
One of the things that I've been studying and looking into is what Measure Z brought to the table.
which we'll get to, but I'd like to focus on the pension side. But I know where you may be going, so I'll hold off.
Well, I was looking at what percentage of income is the city going to achieve by, and where are we going to lose by what we're doing? And the first thing I have to say to you is, and the audience, is this, that public safety is number one. We cannot be cutting our public safety. We should not cut that at all. Not being in the inner circle of what's going on with budgetary situations, I can only tell you what I did for 29 years, what I've done with the county, and what we're doing is there are certain things that may have to be cut, but it all comes from the front. What are we doing now? What are we able to do? And can we continue doing what the progress that we are?
Okay, I'd like to move to Mr. Bakari on the question of pension obligations. What cuts, if any, would you recommend? How would you address the pension crisis that the city of Riverside faces?
First and foremost, if we're going to address this crisis, we are going to have to bring everybody to the table and make it transparent. When we address this, we must think unions, the city, and the community. We can't have one more than the other. We have to think about it from the standpoint of a $560 million liability. We have to think that who overestimated the amount of dollars that we were going to get in that pension? Who underestimated the amount of time that people would be living and the age, the amount of years that they would work?
But on a go-forward
basis, and take that into consideration when we're looking at what we're going to cut. For me right now, sitting on the backdrop saying I want to cut from anything would be somewhat disingenuous, because I think that there's things that I don't know anything about in the city where it isn't so transparent that we don't know where all the wasteful spending is going. I know right now the city is working on a plan that every year they look at a new division in their departments to change and to look at their budget, but I don't know what that is right now, so I don't know what I would cut. But I do know that it is an extremely serious issue, and we will have to do it together from a city, people, and union situation.
Okay. Mr. Fierro.
Thank you. When you're dealing with a budgetary shortfall like we are with our pension obligation, which is anywhere between 550 to 600 million, depending who you talk to, it can't get solved with a quick budgetary cut. Certainly there are stopgap measures to be put in place. I would be in support of selling necessary city assets that would go into a fund to be allocated towards that pension obligation. Restructuring debt is always a really quick, easy way of saving some money without actually cutting services. And even taking one-time large revenues that are put aside into a fund when the city does receive them. But those are just temporary stopgap measures. When you're dealing with a budgetary shortfall as big as this, I come from the business world, and the only way to solve problems that big is to make more money. So I think that long term, this has to get solved through smart and thoughtful economic development. Again, budgetary cuts can help in the short term, and they can get us to the goal line, but it's not going to solve the issue long term. So in my time on the Budget Engagement Commission, when we were dealing with Measure Z and we were dealing with a lot of budgetary cuts, there was a real big issue with realizing that there's not a whole lot of cuts that can be made that aren't going to have huge impacts on crucial city services. Most of the money in the city budget goes towards salaries, and obviously we're not just going to start firing people. So we're dealing with a very small piece of the pie that we can cut from. So to me, you do what you can, but the long-term goal is economic development to actually make more money so that we don't have these problems in the future.
Mr. Avery.
Sure, thank you.
Please.
Obviously a big topic. So I think the key is, first and foremost, we're obligated in the right way to our current pensioners, right? Nothing gets cut from the current pensioners. That's an obligation.
Law.
So, right, so that's first and foremost. The next thing is, I think we look, I think Mr. Bakari said it as well, is you get around the table. You have to have a discussion. This happened the last time the budget faced a crisis, or the city faced a budget crisis. You came around the table and the labor unions, all the groups that were affected through the city departments. It was get on a table, here's what we need to do, and each one took that step because everyone has a vested interest in the city remaining solvent and remaining financially stable. So when you get all the key stakeholders involved and have them say, okay, here's what we can do, this is why this is important, then that's where you find out where things can be changed, altered, and how to move forward.
Yes, sir, please.
I also want to, what I was thinking about is, we have a rainy day fund here in the city, and it was at 15%, and they're moving it to 22% or something of that nature. I think in terms of cuts, we wouldn't be cutting, but what we'd be doing is putting some of that money in our rainy day fund. We should be looking to put it into our, some of that, keep it at 15 and utilize that 5 to 7% for pensions.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Yes.
So what Mr. Bakari's talking about is the city's reserves, which again can be dipped into shortly for a little bit of time, but we do need to maintain a certain level, about 15%, in that fund to maintain our bond ratings that allow us to actually bond things and build things like the downtown library. So,
But if we spike above 15%, can we, in your mind, should we siphon off some of that money to pay off some pension debt?
yes. But again, short-term stopgap measure.
What do you think, Mr. Avery?
I mean, I think all things are open on the table, right? I mean,
Fair enough.
it's a hard thing to answer right here. You got to look at the
Fair
whole.
enough. Mr. Rubio, any thoughts on that generally?
Well, I spoke with the city manager the other day, and he kind of gave me a brief outline of what's happening with the city, and it was a positive meeting because I got a little more insight on what's going on.
But on this issue of the rainy day fund or the reserve, as we know from this discussion, 15% is where we need to hit. If all of a sudden we have an 18% reserve, would you support using 2 or 3% of that, that extra 2 or 3% to pay off some pension
If it's
debt?
going to keep you above water, yes, you do.
Okay, let's move on to Measure Z. As you know, the voters of Riverside were very generous a few years back in passing Measure Z, a sales tax. I want to get a sense what you think about how the city has spent Measure Z money. In your minds, how well has the city done keeping its commitments to voters about how to spend tens of millions of dollars in annual tax receipts from Measure Z? If you think the city has not spent it well, or if you have quibbles with some of the spending, how would you have spent it differently? I'd like to begin with Mr. Bakari.
Well, first and foremost, over 30 years and $1 billion, I hope that Measure Z works, and so far, I think the city has been doing a decent job. First and foremost, if you look at our fire department, they've done a great job with the apparatus that they've brought to the fire department. If you take an opportunity and see how the police department is working and bringing in, I think it was last year they brought in 16 new officers, and this year they're bringing in 17. Yet the issue is the retirement piece, that they can bring that number to 430 officers that they would like to have here in the city. Also, that money is working with our library. We see where the money is going and what they've done with it in terms of the police or the fire department or the library is a very positive thing. Yet we want to make sure that it's continuous and we keep our eye on those dollars, because working with those dollars is a promise that the city made to the community, that they would do their due diligence to ensure that it is not wasteful. And so far, I don't think it has been wasteful, and I think that the city has done a tremendous job in pushing that money to the right places.
Mr. Fierro.
So I serve on the city's Budget Engagement Commission, which was originally formed specifically for this issue, to kind of help have a citizen commission that would advise city council on how Measure Z dollars should be spent. We were expecting about $50 million a year. We got lucky. It's actually a little bit more because of how good the economy's been doing, so we're about $57 million a year. And when city council and city staff, executive management came to us and actually proposed what they wanted to do with the money, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion. It was almost like a lot of the dollars had already been spent. So, and that was a concern of everyone on the commission, but we did the best we could. We went to school, we got presentations from every department, and my only issue with the tax was that, and I was very supportive of Measure Z, obviously it's more dollars for our city, we can provide better city services, better infrastructure. provide more officers and equipment for our firefighters, like Mr. McCarty was mentioning, which we did do. But because of the type of sales tax it was, it couldn't have a specific use. But there was a lot of winking and nodding to the general public through mailers and through literature that basically said what the money would be spent on. And it was mostly police and fire, infrastructure, and tree trimming. But honestly, not enough went to those things if that's what the public thought they were voting for. I'm a big supporter of the public library that we built in downtown, but that certainly wasn't a thought amongst the people voting Measure Z, I believe. And we also paid off a pension obligation balloon and a bunch of other different issues. So I feel like the money could have been spent a little bit more as the public intended, if I had to guess.
Mr. Avery.
Yeah, so I mean, Measure Z was intended for quality of life, right, for Riverside residents. And when you look at that, and public safety offers a huge part of our quality of life. And so we have done that. We've increased the number of sworn officers into the police department. The fire department is taking possession of their new trucks and engines. Great things to improve the quality of life within public safety. Where I think we could be doing better with the quality of life issue is we need to be spending more money specifically on our roads. Currently, as a city, we spend half of what Public Works thinks that we should spend. $13 million a year, and just to keep them at a status quo, they want us to spend $25 million a year, and that's just to keep them status quo. We want to improve, we want to get better. That's quality of life issues. Those are the things that we all drive on every single day, ride our bikes on, or motorcycle, whatever the case may be. I think that as we look specifically, I think as your question is, we need to be looking at how we can allocate more of those dollars to our roads.
Mr. Rubio.
Well, you know, when you go out to the community, as a lot of us are doing, and you talk to the Joe citizen, and some people will say, well, look in front of you, look at the roads, the conditions are deplorable, when is that going to get done? The quality of their lives is one of the most important things that we have. I believe, after talking to the union, after listening to what they're coming up with, is okay. So we have this apparatus that we have now. So it's coming up to date. But what are we going to do in the future? Will we be able to get more? Where our public safety, our police, be able to get the patrol cars that they need, because again, they're going to start getting outdated. My whole reason why I run for city council is to listen to the people, to find the common ground, and to be able to have a voice for those. And I want to work for the citizens of our city. And with that, Measure Z does offer and has offered a good response to the needs, but still there are things that we're going to be facing in the future if we don't watch out.
Mr. Fiore, I want to get back to you with regard to pensions. You had mentioned that part of the Measure Z funding was spent on paying a pension balloon. So when we look at our budget, you know, we have Measure Z, we have other issues to consider. I want to get a sense about what you feel, and all of everyone feels, with regard to the potential for selling off city-owned properties, for example, privatizing certain services, maybe selling off some of the parking garages as a way to pay down pension debt or decrease the pressure on the city budget. I'll start with you, but we'll proceed down the line.
I think I counted three things. So would I sell city assets, privatize services, or possibly look into privatizing like parking garages and parking facilities? Okay. First, yes, I think we should look at selling city assets. You know, if it's not vital, if it's not a building or a piece of property the city itself is using, the city of Riverside is not a business. It doesn't need to be owning property, it doesn't need to be land banking. So I think that immediately should happen. Obviously done in a fair and transparent way, in a way that raises revenue fairly, but I think that should happen. I would never suggest privatizing city services. It's always a short-term gain. You know, we know this from experience that when we privatize certain city services, eventually, once we become dependent on that vendor, prices creep up. You know, they're no longer, they are not as accountable to us as our own employees are, so I would never suggest that. In terms of parking, I mean, that I might actually look at. just because, again, running a parking structure, running a parking department can be a big drain on city funds. But even then, like I said, I would hate to see us contract that out and then slowly but surely see the quality of that service drop.
Mr. Avery.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, when you're facing this kind of issue and this kind of upcoming dilemma, all options are on the table, right? I don't think you can sit, and I don't think any one of us should be yes or no right away.
But I guess philosophically,
yeah,
what's your
philosophically, I
sense?
think that we absolutely have to be open to, if like Mr. Fierro said, if the building asset is not a vital part of a vital city service, and there's a market for that building, right, that will help us, and it's a good, fair, maybe even make some money on it, then absolutely, we need to look at that. Because that's business, right? That's capitalism, is have something. If somebody's willing to pay you for it, okay, then it makes sense. So I think I'm absolutely open to that. Yeah, privatizing city services, fire, police, no way. We have a great asset in our public utilities, right? And that's an important asset to the city and to the residents. We're all owners of that public utility. So that needs to stay and be owned by us as residents.
Mr. Rubio?
Part of the problem that I believe we face is the future. The future, if we're not ready for the future and knowing what the effects has been to other cities, we have to learn from the mistakes of the other cities. The city assets that we have, as spoken now, as parking structures and so on. As is, if you go downtown, you can get the first 90 minutes free, right? After which time they charge you. I'd like to see the revenues on that. I'd like to see what city revenues are coming in and whether or not it's really profitable for us to keep those types of parking assets and all. I would be in favor of possibly selling some of those structures and all, because again, people tend to look to get the bang for their buck. If we're not, if they feel that they have to pay extra, then businesses are going to suffer, and it's finding the common ground, trying to find out exactly what is important and how it's going to protect the quality of life of our citizens.
Mr. Picori.
Yes. I would be real nervous when we start talking about selling any assets until I once again know the full scope of what we're dealing with. I don't know if we said it enough, but we should say it again, that we have a $560 million unrealized, we don't have funds, we're losing. And what should we do? As individuals have said, we have to keep all options available due to the fact that trying to privatize services may not be in our best interest, and it may cost us more in the long run by privatizing. How do we work with that, and do we work with the community, a city, unions, when we think of those things? Also, when it comes to parking, you're losing money if you're dealing with parking, yet at the same time, we have to look that we're building a library, a civil rights institute, we have the chamber, and we have the city of the Riverside Community College, all right there on Market and University are very close. And in that, where's our parking? We need to think of parking, and we need to make it very important. Yet, when we speak on all of this, we're speaking on it from the standpoint of Ward 1. And what are those assets that we have in Ward 3? And what are those areas of concern of parking that we can work with in Ward 3 that will help and assist with this?
I want to speak about another issue that's on the minds of city voters, and that's homelessness. As you may know, in 2017, during the point-in-time count, we counted about 389 homeless in the city of Riverside. We don't know what the number is for 2019. The 2017 number was actually down from prior years. So I want to ask you about Riverside's response to homelessness. We know that the city has reached out to churches and community groups. The city has created an Office of Homeless Solutions. Do you believe that the city should offer more shelters and services, or do you think that would only encourage homelessness? How should the city approach this challenge? And please be specific in your answers. I'll start with Mr. Avery.
Okay. Obviously, I think each one of us hears about it when we knock on doors, when we're talking to residents. And the city and the homeless issue is becoming more and more prevalent. And I spoke at this at the very beginning. I think the city right now manages the issue, right? We have a great housing first model that's been implemented. It's a proven method that has worked in other cities, and we have adopted that here. I think, but as we look forward, how do we prevent homelessness? And I think that's where the discussion needs to start going, is a more proactive approach rather than a reactive approach to homeless. And that comes from our faith-based communities, our community organizations that know families, that are working with families in here. Maybe it's one flat tire, maybe it's one medical bill, and there's something that we can do as a city to prevent it from them even becoming homeless in the first place. I think that's where we should take the conversation.
Okay, let's move on to Mr. Rubio on the homeless question.
Well, I can honestly say that I don't believe that solving the issue is by putting heads on beds. We need to address the drug abuse. We need to address the mental health issue. This issue is very close to my family, since I have a nephew at the age of 31, which is late for a male to be diagnosed. He was bipolar. He is also manic depressive. He lived in a home where he was giving his medication. He's been in and out of the hospital. When he goes into his manic states. And now, at the age of 50, he no longer wants to go into a home.
And that begs the question, I think. You bring up an excellent point, which is, what does the city of Riverside do with regard to folks like your nephew who are service resistant?
Well, one of the things that I do know is that our law enforcement agencies are not the answer. They're not there to take care of the problems of society. We need to work together. We need the support, and the solution really can't be done by just throwing money out there and trying to solve the issue. It's a complex situation. It's one that I believe that we need to work with other cities who have found some solutions and see what fits in our immediate area.
Okay, Mr. Bakari?
On the homelessness area, yes, there is a problem. Do I ever think it'll be fully solved? No, I do not. Yet, in giving credit to our mayor, I must, Rusty Bailey, for taking this head on, going to the churches and asking them about housing first and creating wraparound services for those who are homeless and have some sort of home that the city or someone, the churches or someone has helped them with. And I think that's important. When you're dealing with drugs, mental health, job loss, veterans, and individuals who just give up, we know that those multiplicity of issues that we're facing will not be solved just by one answer. Additionally, when we say 389 individuals, 2017, I think we're talking about something very different from the homelessness that we're dealing with. We're dealing with individuals who perhaps live in someone else's home, individuals who may live in cars, moving mobile vans or whatever, individuals who are having it bad. Some choose to, some choose not to. I would like to give the city credit for what they were able to do at Camp Anza with our veterans and to make it almost zero homeless for our veterans. And I think we should move forward on positive nature with our churches and our community to make that better. Thank you.
Mr. Fierro on the question of homelessness.
So, like I've stated, I serve on the board of directors of Path of Life Ministries, which has given me kind of a front seat view of this issue. And I guess I would respectively disagree with a lot of things that were said. Homelessness isn't complicated. You're homeless when you don't have a home. It's why Housing First works. If we take someone who's homeless and we put them in a stable home, they can begin to address what is the complicated issue, which is mental health, which is drug addiction. And a city cannot properly handle that issue. It's why we work with nonprofit partners like Path of Life, like 211 Connect. And these are groups that have been trying to solve these issues with wraparound services, with job placement, with drug addiction help, with mental illness help. So that is how we can best solve that issue, is the city can help facilitate our nonprofit partners who actually can go out and get donations and be able to help solve this issue. And it's one that has to be solved because, again, it is a humanitarian issue, and it's one that pulls on the heartstrings of a lot of citizens. But it's also an economic issue. It's an issue that my business deals with, I'm sure many businesses deal with, and it's one that can cost community upwards of $45,000 to $50,000 a year. And we know it costs about $25,000 a year to house somebody. So that math is pretty simple to me.
Mr. Rubio, briefly.
Yes, I somewhat agree, but I don't agree totally because of the fact of this. When I am a business owner and I have a group of homeless who stand in front of my business every day, I lose business, right? I'm not able to withdraw and say, you know what, I'm going to close my doors, because that's what some people have done. They've withdrawn. Some owners of businesses here in Riverside and in Ward 3 have said, we're out of here. They know that they can't get the police to help them. You have citizens who on almost a daily basis have homeless walking through, go from Deanza up to Arlington, where Shamel Park is. It's an issue that, again, we have to work together to try to solve the drug issue and the mental health issue. Putting heads on beds is not going to get it.
I want to shift gears slightly and talk about the city council and the mayor. And I pose the following thoughts. For the last couple of years, the city councils face some rocky times, including and especially as it relates to the city manager. So within the confines of the Brown Act, which prevents people who sit on elected councils from conversing with each other, at least a majority of that board, how do you become a leader on a city council of 7? And along those lines, given the confines of the Brown Act and otherwise, should we give more power then to the mayor, who, if he had or she had more power, would be able to possibly short circuit some of these conflicts? I'd like to start with who went first last time. I think you did. So we'll start with Mr. Rubio.
Oh.
We're going to start with Mr. Rubio on this question.
Okay, very good. Well, that's a question that, again, we know that the voters have to vote on changing the charter, because
But I want to get your viewpoint on this question of how do you become a leader on a board with 7 members within the confines of the Brown Act, and because of that, maybe we should just look to a more powerful mayor.
Okay, if we were to go, as you're speaking, with a more powerful mayor, then you tell me how we can get a tiebreaker. We no longer have a tiebreaker, because if there's a 4-4 tie by adding the mayor, right?
Well, that's one way to make a more powerful mayor, give him a vote, but there could be other ways.
What I'm saying is, if he is allowed to vote now, currently, if there's a tie, he's the tiebreaker. He's allowed to vote. If there are 8 people voting by adding the mayor, we no longer have a tiebreaker.
But there are other ways to increase his power other than that.
That is. My true feeling, and I have nothing against the mayor, I have nothing against anything that they stand for, but my feeling is we have to take it to the voters, and the voters have to vote on it.
And how would you vote on it?
Again, that's a good question.
It's fair enough. We don't know what the language is, so I'll let you take a pass on that. Right. I don't know why I just did that, but I did. Mr. Bakari.
Well, being that our city charter first asked for us to have a city manager council type of city, I would find the mayor now having a vote as an issue based upon how our charter.
Let's put that aside.
And what would I do? one of the things that I would do is the first question I would ask is, as a city council member, I was elected by our citizens just in Ward 3. I speak for them. I carry their voice. The mayor carries the voice of the whole city. And what the whole city may be saying may not be in line with what my ward is saying. I speak for our citizens. I speak for them. I don't think that I should carry in what I want to do, but I should be carrying in what they feel I should be doing.
But then how do you do that in the confines of the Brown Act, whether you're speaking for yourself personally?
Well, because I figure what we're doing in our ward speaks louder than words many of the times. People follow our actions and what we're doing. And I think when we begin to speak up, go to our constituents, let them know what's going on, and we go there speaking for them. The mayor will speak holistically for the council, but to speak against the council means that we have to work in a way that we create some sort of commonality, and we don't have those fights with the city manager, the mayor, the council, and the city.
Mr. Fierro.
So the question is, how can you have effective leadership within the confines of the Brown Act in the strong city manager, weak mayor system? Happens every day in Fortune 500 companies, which is basically how the city of Riverside. I get asked a lot, how does this work? And I explain it like a large corporation. You have a board of directors, city council, you have your city manager, your CEO, and then you have a different, unique aspect, which is the mayor.
But what's unique about government is in a company, people can talk.
Of course.
You can't talk to each other.
Of course.
I mean, I've been on record thinking and saying that the Brown Act is, it challenges me.
It challenges me as well. But is the board of directors' job to discuss and to go over stuff? The leader is the CEO. In the city of Riverside, the leader is the city manager, who is appointed by the elected officials of every ward. So the city manager gets to work outside of political expediency and make decisions that he thinks is best for the city and be a true leader. If at any point the citizens of the city of Riverside no longer think that city manager is doing a good job, those city council people have no choice but to fire them, otherwise they will lose their position. So I think the system works. I think the issue is more with the Brown Act, and I agree that it's kind of, I sit on a commission. Sometimes we start spitballing and the juices get flowing, and before you know it, the attorney's up there telling you, hey, So it is an issue.
Yeah. Mr. Avery, your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, how are you an effective leader, right, on the council? And I think as an effective leader, you have to be able to stand up for what you believe in the time that you're given and the opportunities that you're given. And that comes from presenting facts. When you're given an opportunity to discuss on the dais in front of the group, in a public forum, you have your facts, you have your beliefs, and you're able to talk about that. And then that's how you become an effective leader in the confines of the Brown Act, right? So that's point number one to your question. Number two is, how do you view the power of the mayor? And to me, the issue is the rockiness, if you will, I think you called it, comes from the ambiguity. Thank you, tongue tie, I need more water, is where the city charter, right? And people are looking at the city charter and analyzing it in a different way, the power of the veto for the mayor. And that's where a lot of this came to, the rockiness. The mayor is the only person, he or she, elected by the entire city of Riverside. That person should be able to look at a contract, a financial matter, a fiscal matter, and say, you know what, I don't believe this is right, I veto it. And then if the city council decides to override it, well, then that's what it's set up to be, and the city council can then override that decision. But I believe the power of the mayor, they should be able to veto on their discretion.
Our final question for our candidates in Ward 3. By many measures, Riverside is a good place to live. What specifically would you do to help Riverside make the leap from a good city to a great one? That's our final question. And we'll go to Mr. Bakari.
When I hear what takes us from good to great, other than being a good book, is I think quickly about affordable housing. I think quickly about our 4 universities that we have within our city and how we make them as strong economic engines for what we have in our city. I think that by making our institutions greater. We make our city greater. We bring in an innovative structure. We're the city of arts and innovation. We bring in an innovative structure of a medical school. We bring in dollars and funds by setting up UC Riverside had just brought in a wet lab, a $2.5 million wet lab for arts and innovation. We're looking at CBU and how fast they're growing and the things that they're bringing to the city, as well as La Sierra. And all three of the universities have business schools. We need to keep those business students here in our city and provide jobs that will make them stay. Right now, we are losing bodies at our high school and in our city. We need to bring those bodies back. And one of those ways is through housing, affordable housing. And another is constructing long-range development plans that brings in economic development to our city.
Mr. Fierro.
So the question is, how do we make Riverside from good to great?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's broad.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't know if I accept the premise, but let's go. Simply economic development. Plainly, I think it's economic development. So Riverside has long been a suburban commuter town. And I have a dream, and I think we're well on our pathway to it, to be an urban economic powerhouse, to be the economic driver of the Inland Empire, which is something that I think we can achieve within the next 10 to 15 years if we focus on bringing strong service-based manufacturing business to the city so that we can have high-paying jobs, so that the people who live in the city can also work in the city. Because I truly believe that there's nothing more destructive to the day-to-day quality of life than the hour-long commute to work. I want the people who live here and the people who get to enjoy our parks, to get to enjoy the great school system we have at RUSD. I want them to be able to enjoy it for as long as they possibly can. And jumping in your car at 5 a.m. to beat the traffic to LA, to Orange County, to San Diego, to me, that keeps it from being great. If you could wake up 20 minutes before work, drive to work, make enough money to have expendable income to spend it at restaurants, then I think that we can actually become a self-sufficient community that will thrive for the long term.
Mr. Avery.
Absolutely. I love this city. I love Riverside, and I think that that's something that every single one of us has in common. Every single one of you who's watching, you have that in common. We have all chosen Riverside to work or to live, to play, whatever the case may be. We have all chosen Riverside. My vision is clear. My vision is to make our city take the next step. Is we make our neighborhoods safer, our families, and we make it feel safer. We balance the city budget. We resolve homelessness. We work with our schools to give our students the education, the mentorships that they need so when they graduate, they have a place to go, they have a place to call home, that they want to continue to call home for working and for living. I think when we do that and we follow that vision, then that takes us all to the next level, and it gives us all that reason to choose Riverside for the future.
Mr. Rubio.
Well, having lived in Riverside as long as I have, I've heard this premise of let's make Riverside greater than what it is. My thing is, let's maintain and improve what we have. Being great is one thing, but let's help those who need the help. Let's help the small businessmen who go to work every day, open up their shops, and don't have to worry about the homeless. Let's go to an area where there's traffic congestion. Let's fix that problem. Let's have students who come to our universities from our small schools to the large universities that we now have. We're taking those steps. We're doing things that will make Riverside great one day, but it's not going to come overnight. It's the positive attitude that every one of us have. I believe that this is, again, having run for office once before and seeing what the leaders that we've had in Riverside, we need to bring that back. It's not individualism, it's working as a unity.
Thank you, gentlemen. On May 6th, the city of Riverside will mail out ballots for the election in this Ward 3. The candidates are Ronaldo Fierro, Warren Avery, Richard Rubio, and Jalari Bakari. I want to congratulate you gentlemen for running for an outstanding job today. And I want to say on behalf of our sponsors, the Raincross Group, the PIC Group, Riverside City College, where we are today, Spectrum, and Riverside Press Enterprise, who is streaming this debate online, we thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brad Pomerantz.